This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hello everyone, I'm Nitsa Hone, and it is Wednesday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. In today's video, we're going to be looking at Flash, which is an evergreen keyword ability that allows you to play a non-instant spell at instant speed. Usually, cards with Flash are permanents. Giving a permanent Flash gives it considerably more flexibility than most permanents, since being able to play them at any time is a huge upgrade, as most permanents can only be played at sorcery speed. Flash was only keyworded in Time Spiral in 2006, but lots of cards used to say, can be cast anytime you could cast an instant, and they were retroactively given the Flash keyword ability, and the earliest card with that tech showed up in Visions in 1997. These days, it shows up in every set, as all evergreen keyword abilities do. In all, 230 cards have the Flash keyword, and in this video we're going to look at the 10 that have had the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, a quick reminder on how I score cards for these videos. Pro Tour and Mythic Championship top 8s, as well as Legacy and Vintage Championship top 8s are worth 2 points, and a Grand Prix top 8 is worth 1 point. Now, let's get to number 10. At number 10, we have Stasis Snare, an enchantment with Flash. Modeled after Oblivion Ring and many other white enchantment-based removal spells, Stasis Snare exiles a creature until it leaves play. In most standard formats, 3 mana to exile any creature is usually a good deal, and that was the case with Stasis Snare. Unlike most of the similar cards that came before it, Stasis Snare has Flash, and that means that it gets some of the big upside that instant speed removal spells have. This includes being able to cast it at the end of your opponent's turn and the like, but it also means you can use it in response to your opponent targeting their creature with something, giving you a 2-for-1, something the vast majority of enchantment-based removal spells just can't do, since they can only be cast during main phases and only at sorcery speed. Stasis Snare has only seen play in Standard and is 0 points since it rotated out of the format in 2017. Aven Mind Sensor is only 5 points behind it and seeing more active play, so Stasis Snare may be falling off this list at some point in the near future. At number 9 is Spell Queller. Spell Queller kind of has to have Flash to be functional, since it gets a huge part of its value out of the fact that it can exile a spell that costs 4 mana or less. Even though the opponent gets to cast that spell should they ever kill your Spell Queller, they usually aren't going to be casting it in the optimal situation they had before. Even just delaying the spell is a pretty good deal if it comes with a body, and if they never manage to kill your Queller, then you're really in business. There are several other creatures in the game with Flash who can either bounce, counter, or exile spells that are on the stack. If Spell Queller and cards like it didn't have Flash, they wouldn't be able to do any of those things. The fact that it also has a rather efficient 3 mana 2/3 flying body doesn't hurt either. In Standard, it saw a lot of play, at first in Collected Company decks, who could use the top few cards of their deck as a toolbox in a pinch, and sometimes grabbing the Queller from the top in response to a spell was a pretty devastating thing. It also didn't hurt that Spell Queller could actually exile Collected Company, which was one of the most played cards in the format at the time. Even after Collected Company rotated, Spell Queller still saw a lot of play for its sheer power in a variety of decks, including Azorius Aggro, Jeskai Control, Copycat, and Esper vehicles. It has also found some success in modern Collected Company decks, where it fills a very similar role to what it did in Standard. More recently, it has also been featured in Spirit Tribal decks that have found some success in Modern. The Queller is also played in Vintage Survival of the Fittest decks, which, similar to Collected Company decks, use their library as a toolbox, and when the time is right to grab a Spell Queller, it can do it at will. It only has 1 point so far in 2019, so it isn't exactly killing it right now, but it wouldn't be surprising to see Spell Queller in top 8 decks in either Vintage or Modern going forward. At number 8 is Vencer Shape Savant, who is somewhat similar to Spell Queller. While he doesn't exile spells on the stack, he can bounce them to the opponent's hand, meaning the spell doesn't resolve just the same. He has some flexibility too that the Queller doesn't. Not only can he bounce spells of any mana cost, but he can also bounce permanents in a pinch. Over the years, Vencer has been played in various control decks, since a 4 mana 2/2 isn't of interest to most aggro decks, even with all the abilities Vencer brings to the table. Control decks, though, are very happy to add to the board, while also putting their opponent back, and that's exactly what Vencer does, one way or another. In Block, he mostly saw play in blue-green control decks. In Standard, he was played not only in control decks, but also reanimation decks, and being able to bring back Vencer when he was at his best was pretty nice. In Extended, he was primarily featured in Fairies and Tron. In Legacy, he was almost exclusively played in Miracles. Interestingly, Vencer hasn't managed a single top 8 in Modern, though some human decks running him have gotten close recently. He's a likely candidate to put up points in the future, even though he hasn't had any since 2016. At number 7, we have Deceiver X Ark. Deceiver X Ark makes it onto the list entirely because it was part of one of the best decks in Modern from 2011 to 2015, Splinter Twin. The goal was to get an X Ark in play or a Pestermite, which didn't quite make the list, and then put a Splinter Twin on that creature, make a copy of it, which would make a new X Ark, who could then untap the creature with Splinter Twin, and you could repeat this process until you had infinite creatures and attack for the win. The fact that the X Ark has flash is pretty important for the deck. Your opponent could end their turn 3, at which point you could flash in the X Ark, and then you could untap on turn 4 and assemble the combo. Having flash also made it easier to find a window where your opponent was tapped out and unable to interact with the combo in any way. In addition to being a big part of Modern, Splinter Twin decks also did a tiny bit in Standard and Legacy. Modern, though, is where it really excelled, so much so that Splinter Twin ended up getting banned from the format in 2015, and since then, Deceiver X Ark hasn't put up any more points. And number 6 is It Staticaster? While obviously flashing in a 3-mana 0/3 isn't going to strike fear into people, that luckily isn't all It Staticaster has going on. It also has an activated ability that is pretty powerful against decks running lots of X1s, as it can just start picking them off. This is especially nice against creature tokens, since it then damages all other creatures with the same name. In Standard, it mostly saw play in various mid-range decks, but it has really become a fixture in Modern, where it is mostly a sideboard card. However, like some other cards we've looked at already, It Staticaster also had some mainboard appearances as a singleton copy in toolbox decks, running things like Birthing Pod or Collected Company. Those decks could find the Staticaster against opponents who were playing creature tokens, like those generated by Lingering Souls. It's also pretty good against Infect and Affinity decks. Right now, its most frequent home is in the sideboard of Humans decks in Modern. At number 5, we have Containment Priest. The Priest was never legal in Standard or Modern because it was printed in Commander 2014. But that does mean it's legal in both Legacy and Vintage, and it has made the most of that. Containment Priest is a pretty classic hate bear, that is, a 2-mana 2/2 creature with an effect that can really shut down some strategies. In particular, Containment Priest shuts down decks that try to cheat creatures into play in various ways, whether by reanimating them or by using cards like Sneak Attack or Show and Tell. Adding flash to a card with this effect makes it even better, because you can cast it in response to one of these spells or in response to Sneak Attack's activated ability, which then causes the card to do absolutely nothing, meaning you're probably going to be getting a 2-for-1. These types of decks make up a pretty large part of the metagame in the Eternal formats, and as a result, Containment Priest is a fixture there, having amassed 69 points in those formats in the last 5 years. Basically, if you play White in Legacy or Vintage, you probably have some number of Containment Priests in your sideboard. It's going to continue to move up this list going forward. At number 4, we have Ark Angel Avicenna, which is the newest card to make this list. One of the nice things about creatures who come with flash is the fact that you can flash them in to block an attacking creature. Something that hasn't really been how any of the cards we've looked at so far have been used. Avicenna is big enough, though, as a 4/4 flyer that she can do just that. Not only that, she has an Enter the Battlefield ability that gives your whole board indestructible, which thanks to Flash, obviously you can do at instant speed, meaning that she not only comes down and can block creatures smaller than her and kill them, she can block creatures the same size as her and kill them and survive combat herself. All this while she also enables your whole board to be really effective blockers. Having Flash also means you can cast her in response to board sweepers that now do nothing. The fact that she also has Flying and Vigilance really means that she can be a win condition after the dust settles, following the combat after she comes down. Avicenna can also transform into Avicenna the Purifier, who damages the whole board and your opponent because why not? While she was in Standard, Avicenna was one of the best cards around. She had no problem continuing to see a bunch of play the whole time she was in the format, even as it changed with the release of new sets and the rotation of others. If you were playing White and weren't playing a White Weenie deck, you usually had Avicenna in your deck. She was so heavily played in that format that she has almost 100 points from Standard alone. She has never managed to see play elsewhere, and her mana cost may just be a little too high for her to find success in Modern, for example. Still, with this many points, it's hard to imagine her position on this list being in jeopardy anytime soon. At number 3, we have another Angel, Restoration Angel. She not only brings efficient stats that can allow her to eat an attacking creature, she also blinks a creature when she comes into play. This gives her immense flexibility, and Flash allows her to do this in response to a removal spell, allowing your creature to survive. She can also be used to abuse a creature's enter the battlefield or leave the battlefield ability, and she can also work as a combo piece, as if you combine her with something like Kiki Jiki, she allows you to blink Kiki over and over, allowing you to make infinite copies of Restoration Angel that then just win the game. She does a whole lot for 4 mana, and having Flash is what really makes her amazing. She saw a bunch of play in Block and Standard, and still sees a lot of play in Modern, and that's going to continue to be the case. At number 2 is Vendilion Click. The Click gives you a flyer with high power who also disrupts the opponent for only 3 mana. Having Flash means you can use the Click after your opponent's draw step during their turn, and thus have the most information possible before you play it. While your opponent doesn't actually go down a card from the effect, the fact of the matter is that if you are taking the best and or most useful card from their hand and putting it on the bottom of their library, there is very little chance that what they draw will be better. Most of the time it's just going to be worse. It is worth noting you can also use the Click on yourself in a pinch if you desperately need to draw something in particular, and that is some nice added flexibility. Additionally, being blue and having Flash gets you some extra points, since blue decks really like leaving their mana up for counterspells and other instant speed things, and the Click allows you to do that, but helps you avoid getting punished by your opponent playing around your counter magic. The Click has seen play in every format it has ever been legal in, which is usually a really good indicator of a card's power. Obviously, talking about every deck and every format to ever play the card would take forever. Suffice it to say that blue control decks in all of these formats have played the Click a lot, and in Modern especially, and that's going to continue. And at number 1, probably not surprising anyone, is Snapcaster Mage. One of the best 2-drops in the game. The Mage is great because it lets you give any spell in your graveyard flashback. Because the Snapcaster has Flash, this means that you can give an instant in your sorcery flashback and then cast it all during your opponent's turn. This is especially potent with counter magic, but really getting to cast any instant or sorcery from your graveyard is a great deal, especially because you also get a 2-mana 2/1. Like Vendilion Click, Snapcaster usually shows up in control decks, and it isn't completely unheard of for a Snapcaster deck to just win the game with the little 2-mana 2/1 as an attacker. Also like the Click, Snapcaster Mage has also seen play in every format it has been legal in, but to an even greater extent. Blue control decks in all of Magic's formats have featured Snapcaster Mage and continue to feature Snapcaster Mage. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to see any of the over 200 other MTG Top 10s I've already done, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.